Shalom and welcome back. Today I'd like to talk to you about another well-known passage that is often misunderstood. It takes place in the book of Acts. It is the passage where Peter receives a vision. A sheet is lowered from heaven, filled with all kinds of animals, and Peter is told 3 times, "Rise, Peter, kill and eat." Now, many people, especially within the non-Jewish Christian world, have understood this vision to mean that the dietary laws have now been abolished and that Jews are no longer required to keep kosher. But I want you to know something very important. Ask yourself, did Peter eat in the vision? Well, the answer is no. He did not eat. In fact, he refused. Peter says, "Not so, Lord, for I have never eaten anything that is common or unclean, that is, not kosher." So Peter does not walk away from this vision saying, "I can now eat whatever I want." That's not what happens. And this is not the first time we see something like this happening in Scripture. In fact, we see that the prophet Ezekiel had a similar experience. In Ezekiel chapter 4, he is told to prepare bread over human waste, which would have made the food unclean. And like Peter, Ezekiel also refuses. He says that he has never defiled himself in that way. Now, this puzzles many people. They ask, how could a divine vision appear to suggest something contrary to that which is written in the Torah? But the Torah itself tells us that God's people can be tested. And the test is whether they will remain faithful to the commandments of God. So Peter's refusal isn't rebellion. It is faithfulness. Faithfulness to the Torah. Peter knows the Torah. Peter is a Jew. Peter understands that he is not permitted to eat that which is unclean. Now, let's continue with this vision. Immediately after the vision, men came knocking at Peter's door. And who are these men? They were Gentiles. This is the key to understanding the vision. The timing is not accidental. The vision happens, and then Gentile men arrive. This tells us that the vision was not ultimately about food. It was about people. Later in the book of Acts, Peter retells the vision, and he makes the connection even more clearly. He says that God had showed him that he should not call any man common or unclean, not food, but man. So the point of the vision was not that unclean food has now become clean. The point was that Gentiles are not intrinsically unclean. Unclean food is unclean by definition. It does not become kosher simply because someone wants it to. But Gentiles are different. Gentiles are not intrinsically unclean. What makes them unclean is idolatry, immorality, and the pagan practices of the nations. But when Gentiles turn from idolatry and place their faith in Messiah, they are cleansed by God. Peter is not to treat them as they remain unclean. That's the point of the message. Peter is being corrected, not the Torah, but on a man-made boundary that had developed around Gentiles. Let me explain. Certain rabbinic traditions had created the idea that Gentiles themselves were inherently unclean, as though association with them was automatically defiling. But God is showing Peter something very important. Do not call common what God has cleansed. In other words, do not treat Gentiles who have been cleansed through Messiah as though they are still outside, still defiled, and still untouchable, thus beyond fellowship. The vision was never about abolishing the kosher laws found in the Torah. It was about the inclusion of the Gentile. It was about God cleansing people from the nations and bringing them into fellowship through Messiah. So when Peter sees the sheet and then the Gentile men arrive, the meaning becomes clear. God was not declaring pork clean or kosher. He was declaring that Gentiles who turn from idolatry and place their faith in the Messiah are no longer to be called common or unclean. That is the point of Peter's vision, not the abolition of the Torah, not the cancellation of the dietary laws, but the cleansing and inclusion of the nations through Messiah. So the next time someone tells you that Peter's vision was about abolishing the dietary laws, ask one simple question. Did Peter eat? The answer is no, he did not eat. And when Peter himself explains the vision, he does not say, God has shown me that all food is clean. Rather, he says, God has showed me that I should not call any man common or unclean. And that is the point. The vision was not about changing the menu. It was about changing the way Peter saw Gentiles who had been cleansed by God. Kosher food remains kosher. Unclean food remains unclean. But Gentiles who turn from idolatry and place their faith in Messiah are not to be treated as common, unclean, or outside the mercy of God. Peter's vision was never about the end of the Torah. It was the beginning of table fellowship. And once we see that, the passage begins to make perfect sense. So until next time, shalom, and may the faithfulness of Messiah and the Spirit of truth keep you until his kingdom comes.